This is EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Leaders, entrepreneurs, and change agents looking for the opportunity to network and exchange ideas with other trailblazers and to further your brand. The 2.0 conference is for you. Experts from the fields of education, health, internet, marketing, and CXO are welcome to take part in the 2025 conference in Las Vegas, March 4th through 6th. Reserve your space today and receive a 10% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EdUpXE10OFF. That's EdUpXE10OFF. Learn more and register online at www.the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EdUpXE10OFF.
Welcome back to this second segment of a two-part episode on the science of reading. In our last segment, we sat down with Naomi Pena of the Literacy Academy Collective, where she serves as the Director for Community Engagement. She shared with us how the organization supports families of struggling readers holistically. In May of 2023, the mayor of New York City announced a major curriculum overhaul to shake up reading instruction in the Department of Education. The change called for school leaders to choose from one of 3 district-approved curriculum packages. The department also disbanded its in-house literacy coaching program to contract with outside companies to provide coaching for its teachers. Around the same time, the Literacy Academy Collective, a nonprofit whose mission is to build and support a network of New York City schools for struggling readers, and the New York State Education Commissioner, Betty A. Rosa, announced the New York State's participation in the 3rd cohort of the Hunt Institute's The Path Forward for Teacher Preparation and Licensure in Early Literacy. The Path Forward seeks to transform the way educators are prepared to teach literacy across the state. In this episode, we sit down with Emily Hellstrom, Director of Strategy and External Affairs for the Literacy Academy Collective, and learn how the organization organizes its pedagogical practices to support struggling readers in New York City. I am your host, Jacob Easley II, PhD, PMP, and this is EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a podcast for the advancement of educational effectiveness and equity. Let's get into it. And we have another one of your colleagues joining us.
Hello.
I'm going to allow Emily to introduce herself. If you can state your name and then your title.
Absolutely. My name is Emily Hellstrom, and I am also a co-founder of Literacy Academy Collective, and I do external affairs. But in our crazy startup, we all wear every hat. So, I do a lot of interaction with teachers, teacher pipeline, also doing outreach, and of course, we have this big policy piece that we're working on as well.
Right. But I want to go back a bit, and if you could just tell us a bit about your literacy story, for example. When did you first begin to read, and was that an experience of your family members reading to you? When did you first remember independent reading, and how did those experiences of early literacy shape your perspective on how we think about literacy and reading today?
Dr. Easley, thank you so much for this question, because it is such an important one. For me, reading, I don't remember ever being taught to read. I just read. I was sort of in that category of, hyperlexic. I, read before I even got to kindergarten. And I was one of those people where school was my jam. Like, I did really well in school. It was not particularly effortful. And, things, this was a space that I felt really, really comfortable. I went on to a quote unquote good college, and I worked hard to get, all of those buzzwords that we think of when we think, oh, this is what success looks like.
Right.
But really, I feel like I had twins. I got pregnant with twins, and I had twin boys, and that is a lesson in humility in itself.
Indeed.
And it was doubly so because I have two very, very different human beings, even though they came into the world at the same time, and even though I did the same things. I read to them, and I talked about how important school was, and I showed them their letters and all the things that we do as parents that we are messaged to do.
Right.
I did, and I had one reader who very much followed in my footsteps, and it was effortless, and he just read by, it seemed rubbing up against books.
Right.
But my other twin, I had like the perfect home experiment. The other twin was not reading. We were in a, lovely downtown Manhattan public school, shiny new building, excited new teachers. All the conditions were correct. And he wasn't reading. And for a long time, we used a lot of euphemisms. Well, he's struggling a little bit, or he's a late bloomer. There are sort of all these tricks that are reinforced by teachers and the system to say, don't worry, he'll catch up. And that's not true. And we know it's not true. Or lots of people now know it's not true, and I do. As a parent, I sort of think to myself, oh my gosh, if only I had known from the beginning, I would have immediately gone into a different mode with him, because he learns differently.
Right.
And, I think there's a lot of expectations that are around certain students and not around others. And, I think we get into a real bind. If kids are not reading, they need structured literacy. And it's very, very clear from the outset, the earlier the better. And this structure helps them onboard what they need to know. And it doesn't mean that it's not joy of learning, and it doesn't mean, and all the things that I had in my own head about how I learned to read and my love of reading, he was not finding it joyful in any way because he could not do it.
Right.
So there's a real lack of joy if you can't actually, and especially if you look around and everybody else is doing it.
Right.
And he had a twin side by side who was doing it, and his self-esteem was very low. And in fact, for me, the journey towards where I am right now came with his personal journey through school. Around about fourth grade, his wheels fell right off that bus, and he was acting out. And in fact, they had sort of an intervention in my school where every principal, the principal, the AP, all of his teachers, the guidance counselor, everyone, they called us into the building, and they were like, your son is in extreme crisis. He's having they just shy of called him emotionally disturbed. They said he needs deep therapy. And if you don't get him that, he is on a very bad trajectory. I just thought, oh my gosh, this kid is, all of 8 years old,
Right.
Intensive therapy. Like, what is going on here? And it wasn't until a mom at a playground, I was talking to her, and she grabbed my arm and she said, listen, your child is having trouble reading. That's where his emotional disturbance is coming from. And I was sitting on the school board at the time at the CEC, and we have this resolution on our desk that says we have high suspension and expulsion rates, kids who are acting out, kids who are disturbing classrooms, erupting, getting expelled, particularly Black and brown students, even higher rates. And in my head, all of a sudden, I just made that connection.
Right.
If my child is being called a bully and being told you need extensive therapy, is that the same messaging that's happening in, schools with students with families who are lower income, who don't speak English, or are they just being expelled and suspended? And that's when I said, this has got to stop. We've got to get a system that works better for kids.
Yeah, and this is really interesting because there's a body of research that points specifically to that fourth grade period, which can be an indicator for whether or not a student is going to complete their P12 schooling trajectory. And so that is very important. You mentioned CEC.
Yes, I was on the CEC for District 2.
Can you define CEC?
Yes, CEC is the Community Education Council. It's an elected body, similar to a school board, although not as much sort of direct power. We have a power of suggestion, if you will. And I founded something called the Students with Disabilities Committee. I was convening parents. I felt like I was like about a step and a half ahead of them. So I was doing resource sharing and collecting information to pass on, having speakers come in. I had a meeting once a month, and it grew and grew and grew. I had a mailing list, sending out resources, populating a website. And what I found was this story was on repeat. We had new members coming in, and it's almost to a T. It didn't matter, socioeconomic, racial, whether your kid was in first grade, third grade, the stories were the same. And when you have that, you start to realize, hey, this is not one school. This is not one teacher. This is not one family. This is a systemic problem. I ended up getting my child into a private special education school. That was a very difficult process, one that was traumatic for myself, my husband, our family unit. There were so many pressures placed on us in order to do that. But we did manage to do it. And, it was an almost instant change, Dr. Easley, not because all of a sudden he read on grade level,
right,
but because all of a sudden he was walking into a school room that was designed for him. He knew that this place would meet him where he wanted to go and accelerate him to where he could be. Meet him where he was, accelerate him to where he wanted to go.
Providing both emotional and the appropriate academic support.
Absolutely. No one was saying, "You're doing well," when he knew he wasn't doing well. No. Instead, they were saying, "Hey, what can you do? And let us teach you how to do what you don't know how to do." There's a difference. And kids know it. They know when they're not doing well. And they know that if a grown-up is saying you're doing well and they can demonstrably see that they're not, that is very disconcerting for them. It feels very much like lying.
Particularly when you're living in a society of literacy.
Yeah.
And you have a twin sibling who is outpacing you.
Absolutely.
In the same home. So you mentioned earlier the term structured literacy.
Yes.
Can you define that for us?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking, because I think there's a lot of misconception as to what that is and what that looks like. Structured literacy is basically breaking down, and really it could be anything, but in the literacy sense, we are breaking words down into their smallest possible components, and language into its smallest possible components. We're teaching those directly and explicitly in a systematic way that is cumulative. It builds, each skill builds on each other, and these are the building blocks that lead to reading. It is also relevant that we are teaching those skills in all of the strands of the reading rope being a sort of graphic way of understanding all of the components that lead to reading. This is based in evidence that many literacy researchers over decades of time across countries and in various different settings have shown these are the components that need to go into teaching language. There's a bottom component, which is sort of the decoding component, and then there's a top, sort of like the comprehensive higher order. We need both of those. But if one is missing, then there's no reading, right? So if you don't have the decoding, you don't have the reading. If you don't have the language comprehension, you don't have the reading. So we have to do both, but we have to also do that in a systematic way where the skills build on each other, and the students recognize that they're making progress. It also has a multisensory component so that students are getting this feedback in different ways, in a multisensory way.
Is that related to? I'm sure I know it is.
Yeah.
The
The
science.
science of reading,
And
yes.
so the science of reading. So what does that mean to you when
Yeah.
you hear people say the science of reading, and because you're in this space, how would you define it to folks?
Yeah. We like to use a very sort of laborious terminology, which is culturally responsive, evidence-based practices rooted in the science of reading. And the reason that we say that, and shortcut, of course, we say science of reading, but we mean by that is there are some evidence-based practices that a wide array of different practitioners, be they neuropsychologists, linguists, speech and language pathologists, lots and lots of different people in university settings have done research. And those components are all coming together to say, hey, we know that this is how the brain acquires language. And then we're going to translate that research into practice that we see play out in the classroom, that teachers can actually perform, and that kids can actually onboard. So it's I would say, a really wide berth of research. And it's, of course, ever growing, but I would say there's a good foundation of things that we know we must do. And we know that the majority of kids must have in order to learn. Now, there are some kids, and this is where we get tripped up. There are some kids, about 30%, who really, with broad-based instruction, they're going to pretty much do it.
Right.
Like I acquired language, like my one twin acquired language. Many educators, if you learned that way, chances are you're having a pretty good feeling about school in general. You might go into the teaching profession.
Right.
If you had a really crummy way of learning, you're not necessarily going to become an educator, in the same way. You're not going to have those feelings about school in that same way. So there becomes this reinforcement effect where teachers think, hey, if it happened for me that way, that's probably how it happened for everyone. And then, of course, there was this big split, and I don't want to get into a whole big reading wars, type of thing.
We're just going to say Lucy Calkins.
Listen, I mean, even, I think Professor Calkins is seeing that, perhaps she got the balance wrong in her balance. Certainly we know from research, from even images of the brain, we know kids need this. And the thing that I get so excited about is in a setting like this, where we're in an instructional learning stance for teachers, they're realizing how exciting it is to be able to watch their students actually grow and learn, and all their students, even their most struggling educators.
Right.
I mean, their most struggling students. Because lots of teachers have, they have that section of the class where they're like, oh my God, I don't know how to get those dudes, and I'm going to pass them off to the speech and language, they're going to get pulled out, and they're going to, all of that, like they're offboarding that. Wouldn't it be just so exciting if we could reach every student in our class? And we know that structured literacy does that.
So we're here at your summer practicum.
Yes.
In Lower East Side, Manhattan. And I've observed a few classrooms, and there are multiple adults with groups of students. Mm-hmm. And you explained to me that the students are grouped by developmental level, or based on assessments that determines where they are on their trajectory for successful reading and literacy, not necessarily by age or by grade. Outside of that, can you paint a picture for the listening audience of what a classroom would look like here at the summer practicum, and the purpose of the summer practicum?
Absolutely. This is actually the part of the work that makes me the most excited. I love students, of course, but it's really, our educators are the key component, and when they are supported, then of course our students move. And what we have found over and over again is NYCPS educators are some of the most gritty, powerful, incredible, dedicated teachers that you could find anywhere. So we find that they are just ready to learn, eager to learn. We have set up a summer practicum where it very much mirrors actually the way that our students learn, where we're not just telling, we're doing. So we have about 12 hours of a workshop class that they take in, we use PAF, which is our reading program. We do 12 hours of a webinar, synchronous. You get to ask questions, all of that. Then we move into this exciting work of a practicum. It is a 5-week experience using a summarizing setting. So we have teachers with students. Students get a big boost because they're learning for 2 hours every single morning in an intensive reading program for 5 weeks. Teachers get to practice because really they need to do and get feedback just like kids do. So what we have set up is a co-teaching situation where we have teachers who are experienced in this reading program. Most of them happen to come from the Windward School, which is a private special education school that uses this program. They come in, they work with NYCPS teachers, and right away we put them into the teaching mode. Right. So Ilya has set up batting and fielding. So a teacher gets up the first day, they give a lesson. The other teachers, the co-teachers, are walking around and they're giving feedback to students, but they're actively participating in that classroom. They're watching that, mentor teacher, if you will, somebody who's experienced in that program do.
Right.
The very next day, they are doing. That is just so exciting, right? They're diving in. They are exercising that muscle that is totally new. They are so brave and putting themselves in that doing position. The thing that is also exciting is we've got the 2 hours of teaching. Then the kids go back to their regular summarizing programming. The teachers continue, and they are lesson planning with their co-teacher. And then we have mentor coaches who are coming in. They have been observing, they're giving feedback. So there's 2 hours of planning, coaching, and feedback. So that 4-hour day, right, Monday through Friday, 2 hours of teaching, 2 hours of planning, coaching, feedback. It means they've got this very concentrated, it's almost like a boot camp, if you will, right, where they are exercising that muscle every single day so that by the end of the 6 weeks, they have not only learned with their brains, they've stood it up, they've planned it, they've received the diagnostic feedback, and then they've given that lesson for the next day.
Oh, that's wonderful. So this essentially is a practicum tied to a student's regular summer academic programming.
Exactly.
And most of the students you serve,
so they go to this summarizing site.
Okay.
But we have actually been working for months in advance with the principal, the superintendent, the superintendent's team, admissions team, all of that. And we are targeting this to students who are struggling. So that we have been looking at their Acadience benchmarks, seeing, these kids are the ones who are struggling to make academic progress during the school year. Mm-hmm. The thing that's also exciting is, Naomi, who you met earlier, she and the parent coordinators are sitting down together. They're saying, how can we do outreach to parents? They're making phone calls. They're explaining what the program is. We had a breakfast and a Zoom meeting so the parents can understand, so that they have buy-in. We've got our Piragua man today who's giving ices to all the kids who showed good attendance. All of these elements go in. We can't teach kids how to read if they're not in class. So we know we have to involve families, bring them back in. Why would they have their kids show up every day if they're getting the same old thing that wasn't working for their child already? We're explaining them, giving them buy-in, explaining to them, hey, this is different, this is new.
Right.
We get that. And then all of a sudden we see these teachers who are in their summer program, they're going to go on and teach an after-school program in this district with those same kids. So we're working with principals. It's a systematic approach to this as well.
And we're in District 1 of New York City Public Schools, which is formerly New York City Department of Education.
Yes, NYCPS. I love it. The rebranding.
So NYCPS.
Yes.
I actually had to look that up because I wasn't sure what NYCPS stood for. Are you an educational leader or organization seeking innovation or just a new perspective? Then look no further. Accelerated Excellence Consulting is dedicated to offering support to educational leaders and their organizations to meet their full potential for excellence. Services include strategic planning and problem solving, continuous improvement expertise in areas such as assessment and accreditation, and professional development, empowering leaders, individuals, and groups for personal growth for organizational excellence. To learn more, find us online at xeconsulting.org. That's xeconsulting.org.
Leaders, entrepreneurs, and change agents looking for the opportunity to network and exchange ideas with other trailblazers and to further your brand. The 2.0 conference is for you. Experts from the fields of education, health, internet, marketing, and CXO are welcome to take part in the 2025 conference in Las Vegas, March 4th through 6th. Reserve your space today and receive a 10% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EdUpXE10OFF. That's EdUpXE10OFF. Learn more and register online at www.the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EdUpXE10OFF.
We're on location in a New York City public school with Emily Hellstrom, Director of Strategy and External Affairs for the Literacy Academy Collective. We ask her, how does context shape the implementation of structured literacy for struggling readers at the Literacy Academy Collective?
Really wonderful question. And this is why we do this practicum, really. Teaching children to read does not come in a manual. This is about deep teacher knowledge, ongoing teacher knowledge, and supporting educators in ongoing professional development. The body of science of reading is vast and growing. We're learning new things. You mentioned that we have this summer practicum. It is in service of what's going on during the year. We have a standalone school, South Bronx Literacy Academy, PS 642 in the South Bronx in District 7. There is ongoing work that is happening year-round. Our school is set up that we have a foundational reading skills program every single morning for 90 minutes, every single day, Monday through Friday. But we don't stop there. Every class is a literacy class for us. We are constantly retooling, reworking, looking at how are we infusing literacy, both oral language, direct explicit instruction. We didn't even talk about writing yet. Our encoding, both our encoding and our written expression, both of those are so important because they reinforce reading.
Right.
So we are at our school looking at that across the day. Also, math. We've got to look at this stuff with regards to math too. What are our foundational numeracy skills? How are we onboarding those for students who struggle with language processing, for students who, struggle with word problems, even just with their basic numeracy skills? So we definitely are looking at those structures all the time. Even with our program that is so good, our PAF reading program, we're constantly saying, hey, we just had a professional development workshop actually the other day with our leaders, our program facilitators, saying, how are we going to infuse even some more, Okay, there are these highfalutin words, orthographic mapping,
Right.
phoneme, grapheme, correspondence. How are we going to infuse even more phonemic awareness into a program that's really, really good because they're doing segmenting and blending, but we know our English language learners, our lowest groups, they need even more and with more repetition. So we're taking this summertime to pilot and say, how can we onboard this? This is where, and we have sort of 4 areas. How do we improve teacher knowledge in this area? How do we pilot new ways? How do we systematize? And how do we differentiate?
Okay.
Right? Because not everyone's going to need the same dosage. If you're getting phonemic awareness, if your kids are doing it, we don't need to be spending time going over and over and over again with them. They need to be aware of it, but there was this big debate on phonemic awareness. Do we need to do it in the dark? I think we've come out on, no, we don't. But we do if kids are really still struggling, even though they're getting this structured literacy.
And that's part of your foundational instruction.
Absolutely. And then we're infusing the language through science and social studies using expository writing, explicitly taught expository writing skills lessons. We do deep sentence work. So our unit in science or social studies might look like this. In our school, this is. We might take a 3rd grade standard like erosion.
Right.
And we say, okay, how are we teaching erosion? We're getting a lot of that upper reading rope. We're maybe using an article and some videos, so different multimedia where we're showing what is erosion, what even is that concept, right? This is what erosion is at a beach. This is what erosion is in the desert. Then we go out in the field. Hey guys, this is what erosion looks like in New York City. It looks like a pothole. You know what I mean? Right? Like this is where we get into really cultural relevance, right? Maybe our kids aren't going to beaches every day. They know what a pothole is. Erosion is right here around the corner from you. So we are going out into the field. They're getting a real bird's eye view of what that looks like. So, and then we're front loading vocabulary, erosion, all of this good, deep, juicy stuff. Then we have our curriculum developers, our curriculum writers. They're taking an article, they're paring it way down, making it accessible for kids who cannot onboard stuff through reading because they might be 2-3 grade levels behind. They have an article that they're all reading together with the teacher. Then we do deep sentence work. We're saying, how do we make a sentence using some of the vocabulary that we've learned? How do we make that sentence longer, bigger, fatter, juicier, with clauses, but because so, all of that good stuff so that we teach kids the mastery of a really well-formed sentence. Because if you can do that, then you can put 2, 3, 4 sentences together. Now you're cooking with paragraphs. Now you're starting to link paragraphs, thesis, all this other stuff. But we are not putting the cart before the horse, because then kids get overwhelmed. They feel like, I don't know where I am. Instead, they're saying, wow, I just wrote a really good sentence on stuff that I just learned, both away from home and at home. Now I'm wrapping that all up with a hands-on science experiment in erosion. I'm pouring water over sand. I'm watching it crumble away. Now that is locking these words, concepts, and sentence structures into my brain in ways that are the complete picture.
So that's an example of how you're using or applying the science of reading or structured literacy across the curriculum.
That is correct.
In some ways. I saw today teachers carrying clipboards, and some were making notations while others were, I would say, in the front of the classroom providing instruction. So it seemed like there's a focus on evidence. So evidence-based decision-making is considered to be a vital condition of educational effectiveness. So can you just explain for us, how do classroom teachers go about using data to implement structured literacy?
Yeah. It is so important for kids who struggle to read, kids who have either a diagnosed or undiagnosed language-based learning disability. All of those things sort of look a lot, very, very similar, right, when we're in that classroom. they are actually changing the structures of their brain when they're learning in this way. So if you're sitting with a mistake for too long, then you're actually digging out, neuroscientists have shown you're digging the wrong passageway. And we know that is not, we got to dig the right passageways. So there is direct and immediate diagnostic feedback. So the teachers are going around, they're giving positive reinforcement for things that are the right way, and they're putting a dot next to things that work, and then immediately correcting things that are not. At the end of the day, as part of that planning, we're not creating lesson plans for like weeks in advance. That's an everyday thing, because we are taking the direct diagnostic feedback. What did I see my student learn today? What do I need to review? What do I need to actually lesson plan and actually start from the beginning again because they're not getting it? And we are planning our lessons based on the direct diagnostic feedback. So that's what they're learning in these classrooms. At our school and our program that is up in Brooklyn, we do actually progress monitoring we use Acadian's progress monitoring suite. We're doing that every week. Why are we doing that? We need to see, hey, are kids moving? We do group, as you said, not based on necessarily grade level, but on skill level.
Right.
Those skills are very dynamic. Every 4 to 6 weeks, we're saying, hey, if a kid's moving, they need to get into that next group, because this is an accelerated learning program.
Right.
We've got kids who are 2 and 3 years behind. We're not content with usual progress. We need to make accelerated progress. So if a kid is advancing through these skills, we're moving them into the next thing. That's why some of these routines and structures are so good. They're with the next teacher. They don't need to learn a whole new set of routines. They're with the same routines, the same teachers. They're immediately bonding with that teacher because they're getting the same wonderful, explicit, direct feedback from that teacher. So we're taking that diagnostic on a daily level, we're taking it on a weekly, and then of course we're taking benchmarks throughout the year, seeing how we're, in a global sense, moving our kids. And then over time.
And so how is teachers supported in being able to use evidence? Here in the practicum, it seemed quick, rightfully so, because this is only a 6-week program, 5 of which are working directly with children. So that's a daily approach. Yep. And for the traditional academic year, at least a weekly approach. So how are teachers supported in their use of evidence-based decision making?
Our entire Literacy Academy Collective was one of our mission, a foundational pillar of our mission is to support teachers and educators. We know the structures of learning. They apply to students, they apply to grown-ups. We cannot be throwing things at teachers in ways that do not support them in their own growth and ability to onboard new ways of teaching and grow and learn. One of the ways that we do that is this summer practicum, so that teachers feel very confident. They come out of this 6 weeks feeling very confident that they can plan, deliver, and then assess how they did and plan for the next day a 90-minute structured literacy lesson in the basic skills of reading. So they come out of this summer doing that. All of our educators must go through that process. I say must. We're not mandating things. They want to. They are so excited to be in this program. It's super hard. They're flexing muscles. They're in the summer, but they want to do it. Because we've given them that base, that foundation of, okay, I know what I'm doing, it makes onboarding other skills during the year that much easier, because they feel very supported in the basic, sort of premise that we set up for students and families. We're going to do this reading thing. Then we have Literacy Academy Collective basically funds professional learning experiences throughout. That may come in big PD. We've had many of our teachers go through LETRS training, LETRS. That's a sort of a deep why and how behind evidence-based practices. We also do, we've done PDs on handwriting, so OT-based things, articulatory gestures, lots and lots and lots of different mini PDs. Reading structures. How do we do read aloud? We're very, very intentional with our read aloud. It's not just like, oh, read a fun book. Yes, that's what it feels like to the students, but for our teachers, those instructional minutes are so valuable because that's all that background knowledge that our kiddos need. And we know they can onboard because they're so ready to soak it in. They're very, very intelligent. They can get all this background knowledge. They just don't know the structures of reading themselves yet. So we're giving them grade level content. So we have to be very intentional with that. So we're doing all of that onboarding, but we're also doing it through team planning. Our speech and language pathologists are part of our team. They have incredible knowledge that they can onboard to our entire team. Everything that we do is in a tier 1 setting, so no kids are being pulled out. We're very special in that we only, in our school, we only have struggling readers. So we are still differentiating, but we are differentiating with a lot of the same problem. And I would say it's really important that I name that, because that is something that in, maybe other settings just does not exist. That being said, our speech and language pathologists are working in our classrooms. They're part of our teams. Students, generally speaking, if something is happening with a child who needs specific speech and language extra, chances are all of our students need this. So we're not taking that student out. No, we're having that SLP provide that instruction for all our kids, because what is good for one is generally good for all. Same with OT. So that's why I say tier 1. This is happening in a general classroom setting.
Okay. So this really echoes through a byline, or a through line actually, of what you talked about, the frustration as a parent, and the need for an environment not only where students feel supported, but in this case, teachers also feeling supported. So kudos for that.
And I would say I want to bring up Zaretta Hammond. She's just such an incredible, really, like we have been following her for a long time. She talks about the neuroscience of trust and culturally responsive education, and talks about how at the basis of our culturally responsive, like the first step to culturally responsive education is that student-teacher bond.
Right.
We must support that. And we think really in our setting, we are doing that, and it is allowing teachers to have a bond with their students. Mm-hmm. We have a teacher who we interviewed early on who said, I've never felt this with a student before. With all my students, I have a closeness to them that I've never had in all my 13 years of teaching. And it's because I am reaching them for the first time, and they know it. And they trust me to not leave them not knowing. Right. And right. We would say that is really at the heart of it, right? That bond, that teacher-student bond, is really where it's at. That's the start.
Yes, definitely. Care and trust are two of those foundational attributes that are needed to have positive relationships in classrooms, and particularly between the teacher and student. So for your new teachers, what have you found to be the most difficult aspect of implementing structured literacy or science of reading, and what supports have you provided for them?
Great question. You have a lot of very good questions, I have to say. You're so thoughtful. You're so thoughtful. So I do a lot of the teacher pipeline, teacher hiring, as I mentioned, and we are looking for educators who are ready to learn,
right?
To have growth stance, to have empathy, for their students who are learning and who have the bravery to say, I'm learning too. Where we run into problems with new teachers is not them knowing nothing. When teachers know nothing, it's great. They say to us, I don't know, teach me.
I'm a tabula rasa.
Exactly. And that's great. We want to, we love that and we want to support that. Where it gets difficult is, we all know change is difficult. And if you have been teaching in one way for a long time, it can be really hard to change. It was my own student. It took my own student for me to confront my own ableist thinking. Mm-hmm. That is very difficult as a parent. You have got to dismantle all of this baggage that you have, a fear, all of these things that prevent us from growing. You got to leave that at the door. And it's hard for grownups, especially when so much of what makes us feel good about ourselves is, I know everything, or I'm at the front and I'm the teacher. This is very difficult stuff to dismantle that. And we find that when teachers can't get into that growth mode, right, when they can't sort of put on their learning boots at the door, that's when we run into trouble. Listen, we try to support them through that too. We try to be very gentle because we know there's a lot of ego wrapped up in that. Teachers come with their own background and trauma, their own educational traumas that they walk in through the door. And not to get too, psychobabbly on you, but, those are real things. So we want our coaching and mentoring and Ilya, our instructor of education, she goes a long way on what does adult learning structures look like to unpack some of those things for our grownups too.
Yeah, and they probably often also come with their own identity or perception of who they are as a teacher. And if they've been successful in one environment in certain contexts with certain students, it does not necessarily translate into different environments. So I think part of this, which you mentioned earlier about how the context has been important for shaping how LAC approaches its work, is that you have to sometimes be a bit nimble as well.
Oh, yes.
So what have you learned about supporting student success through structured literacy that adds to the current literature, if anything? So if you had to write a book, something had to be rewritten around the approach for structured literacy or science of reading, what would you insert?
Well, first of all, I think that we are in a unique setting. So often, evidence-based practices, science of reading, and structured literacy hasn't been brought to a public school setting, but also a public school setting in the most marginalized communities, where the barriers to acquiring literacy have been either systematically withheld, and we have a deep racist history in this country of withholding reading for certain populations. But additionally, educators who have not been properly trained, we've got language barriers, we've got other traumas that are going on. We have, there is a lot going on in our classrooms every single day. So I think we are pioneers in many, many ways. We are taking something that is being done very, very well in private special education settings. They have learned a ton, and we have so much to learn from them. Mm-hmm. But what we say, and the reason that we don't call our teachers who are here mentor teachers, is those private special education teachers and settings are learning from us, because we are taking this to students who have not had this, but who have other barriers that they don't have in those settings, right? When you have, the opportunities, privileges, all these other things that are going on, and in those private special education settings, there are some steps you can skip. We can't skip any steps, not for our kids.
So I'm going to talk a bit about the mission or sort of goals for the organization. You explained that the work of LAC occurs at the intersection of race, poverty, and disability. So, what does that look like in practice, and how might it serve as a model for educational equity for others or other organizations? Naomi Benya, Director of Community Engagement, joins us as we wrap up this episode.
The work that we're doing is massively intentional. One of the reasons that I was hesitant, I was like the last holdout, as I said, to join the organization was I wanted to make sure that if I was going to jump into a space, that it was centering the forgotten children and the forgotten communities that often are dismissed, ignored, or when they are spoken about, there's negative connotations. And I'm of the opinion that our reputations, I had this one boss to this day, her words always ring in my ear. She always said to me, Naomi, your name is all you have. And that is massively hard to repair. So, and not that I'm some superstar, in my home, I think I am. But I think it's very intentional. Like if you involve yourself in anything, your name is attached to that. And you are going to then take on all of the stuff that comes with that.
Right.
So it was very key to me that if this is the work we're going to do, that if this was the mission, that it was true to form. And not that, that it's needed the approval of someone of color to be like, oh, guys, it's good here. They're doing good work. But I think it's really important that everyone that's at the table, they look like me, because as they say, often skin folks aren't kin folks. So whoever's at the table knows what the mission is.
Right.
And that is constantly being talked about. Who are we hiring teachers? Are they teachers of the community? That is like, and I have to say, in South Bronx Literacy Academy, the work that we've done has attracted the biggest unicorns in the system, men of color.
That's wonderful.
We have more than one. Okay, and that's the biggest.
we have this. I have this joke when I was in educator preparation in a different state, running an early childhood program for educators, future educators. Just having one male student was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And of course, we had 3.
Yeah.
So that was huge.
Yeah. So the fact that we have them in our classrooms, and when Emily and I have gone to speak to colleges who are doing this work, we lead with that. Like, if you're walking into in classrooms of students who do not look like you have to be constantly in a learning stance, because this is not your lived experience. You're going in and you have to learn, you have to understand. So, and we use that with everyone, with our teachers. We use that with our parents. We use that when I do my community work. I am constantly educating, and to a certain, to a lot of the extent, unfortunately as well, a lot of the decision makers that make policies, that do laws, they don't know this either. They think it's this weird phonics thing. Like, no. So they just don't understand what's happening on the ground, because there's so many layers far removed from the ground. And we're the reminder that the ground is here, and we're giving you the live report.
Yeah, I always say that education is one of the professions that is open, which means everyone has had some experience with education, and folks have their own opinions. Most often those opinions are, it is easy to teach. And the reason why is because a teacher who is very good at his or her work makes it look easy.
Yes.
You don't know what's going on behind the curtain.
All of the work.
But that leads for folks who've had negative experiences, as you both talked about with your
Both of our
children.
kids, yeah.
I was going to say
both of our sons. They are both boys, yeah.
Both of your boys. That leaves that negative impression that can that can be a lifelong impression around, oh, the system is failing. Here's my opinion. And overall, the system is not failing overall. I think there are pockets where we have not gotten it right in education.
Absolutely.
So the plan is to build a network of New York City public schools, or NYCPS.
Yes.
PSs for the academic success of struggling readers. So how can community members in New York and beyond help you to achieve this goal? How can folks connect with you?
Well, there's many ways to connect with us. So we're all over social media. So that our tags are Literacy Acad, AACAD, NYC.
Our website, literacyacademycollective.org. And then we are public schools. So if you know a struggling reader who is in the Bronx, we have a program for you. We have a school for you, South Bronx Literacy Academy, and you can find that on My Schools. We eventually will be a 2nd through 8th grade. This year we have 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders. And we are opening a model classroom pilot in Brooklyn, but that will hopefully be on the trajectory to become Central Brooklyn Literacy Academy, and then Queens and Lower Manhattan and beyond.
And as I jokingly, but really not jokingly say, world domination.
But you know, we also we are a school support organization. We are a nonprofit. Of course, we would love to be introduced to donations, big and small, and big.
Right.
Big and small and big.
Yes.
But that's the story in education in general, particularly with the retrenchment of funds sometimes, particularly for public education.
Yeah. But I also, I want to say, because this is a podcast by educators for educators, and I would say there's a lot out there, a lot of misinformation, bad information that ties this to secret forces that are coming to take over public schools and shut them down, and that's not true. And so I would just say, please, before you close your mind and your heart to science of reading, see how it's affecting children, and how when they make progress, they want to come back for more. And that spark is really what people get into education for to begin with. And so I would just say, find that article. If you are saying, "Ooh, I don't want this," find that article that allows you to peek behind the curtain and see what this is all about. Because I think it's pretty exciting.
And we're also always open to talk to people. Many times, one of our biggest contacts in our listserv are teachers.
Yeah.
And not just from New York City, from across the country. Mm-hmm. And we are going to continue, we're going to start to launch some regular workshops. So getting on our mail list is always ideal. We do not flood your inbox regularly.
We don't have time to.
Really don't. We do it maybe once a quarter to announce stuff that we're working on. And so there is just like we are in a place of learning to give to others, we continue to do that with others as well. So if there's some questions, some burning minds want to know, we are not beneath answering an email and getting on a Zoom to talk either.
So Emily and Naomi of the Literacy Academy Collective, thank you for this opportunity to learn with and from you.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I've appreciated it.
Thank you.
Thank you for engaging with the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community. You can find this episode and others on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Music. And if you like this episode, please don't forget to follow us and share within your network.